Good morning, everyone. We will begin our session today in 1 minute. Okay, it is 10:05 a.m. So let's make a start. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, I'll just run through some webinar etiquette for our session today. Please include your name and organization in your Zoom listing on the side there. Please turn off your videos and mute your microphones. This will make our bandwidth work a little better. Please hold all questions for the Q&A session unless invited to do otherwise. Please type your questions in the chat or feel free to raise your hand and we'll then call you to unmute. The screen share is disabled for all participants. Just for your notice, this session will be recorded and it's also being live streamed on YouTube. If there's an emergency, a standardization staff member will advise of the protocols. Okay, so that's it for our formalities there. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking your time to attend our stakeholder consultation for electrical appliances on this rainy Friday morning. My name is Kimberly Badlu, and I am a standards officer in the standardization division of the TTBS. I'm responsible for the electrical portfolio. This usually focuses primarily on the development of national standards for electrical codes and products, lighting products, and energy efficiency. We're here today to discuss the requirements for the proposed draft compulsory standard for electrical appliances and to solicit feedback from you, the major users of the code. So this standard is a revision of the 2016 standard for the labeling of electrical appliances. Most of you will be very familiar with that standard because it is a compulsory standard. And this draft standard is currently at the public comment period. So the intention is that it will maintain the compulsory status, and therefore it is very important that the stakeholders weigh in at this juncture and make sure that everybody is familiar and everybody is aware of all the requirements and any changes made to the document. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Mr. Rodney Ramnath. Mr. Rodney Ramnath is the manager of the certification division at the TTBS, and he is currently acting in the post of executive director. He holds an MSc degree in project management and a BSc in industrial engineering from both from the University of the West Indies. He's also registered as a principal quality management systems auditor by the International Register of Certified Auditors. As the manager of the TTBS certification division, he represents the organization and the country on certification matters at regional and international levels. This includes representation at CrossQ, which is the CARICOM regional organization for standards and quality, and the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. He is also well-versed in quality infrastructure and its mechanisms. So Rodney, I transfer the floor to you.
Thanks very much, Kimberly. I'm just doing a quick mic check. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. You can proceed.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. It is my privilege to welcome you to the stakeholder consultation on the draft compulsory national standard for electrical appliances. This webinar will highlight the key requirements of the draft standard and will allow stakeholders to provide feedback before it is finalized. We have invited a broad range of stakeholders, including importers, distributors, and retailers of new and used electrical appliances, electrical engineers, educators, regulatory agencies, and members of the public to share your concerns, recommendations, and feedback. Through this process, the final standard is expected to be practical and implementable. Electrical appliances are staples in every home, which make life easier and help to save time and energy to perform certain tasks. These appliances can range from kitchen essentials, such as refrigerators, microwaves, toasters, kettles, and food processors, as well as appliances for other areas, such as washing machines, dryers, vacuum cleaners, fans, audio and video equipment. Since they impact every member of the household, the safety of these items is paramount. This is why Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards has made it a priority to keep our compulsory standards for electrical appliances current, relevant, and aligned to technological and industry developments. Participants here know better than most how important it is to ensure that electrical appliances are safe. According to the National Fire Protection Association from the USA, any device that generates heat, for example, stoves, dryers, and heaters, or any device that heats up with extended use, such as fans and computers, is a potential fire hazard. Therefore, you cannot compromise the safety of any electrical appliance. We are here today to review the requirements for electrical appliances listed in the public comment draft of TTCS 24, Electrical Appliances Compulsory Requirements. This draft standard should not be new to the stakeholders present here today. We have been using and enforcing compulsory standards for electrical appliances for over 25 years. Many of the reference standards within the public comment draft would have also been adopted as national standards over the years. However, this revised draft contains undated references for all internationally accepted product standards. This approach will help us to ensure that the standard continually refers to the most recent version of the reference standards. This list will also be made available on TTBS's website, and it will be updated as necessary to include any new standards which are being used by industry and approved by TTBS. As we focus on the draft standard, we will review the requirements, compliance mechanisms, and discuss the reference standards. In addition, we will briefly outline the standards development process and key safety and performance tests, and provide an overview of the proposed enforcement mechanism. TTBS has the authority under the Standards Act, Chapter 8303 of the Laws of Trinidad and Tobago, to propose that certain standards be made compulsory. Compulsory standards can be declared if they serve one or more of the following objectives. And these include: protect the consumer or user against danger to health or safety, protect public or industrial health, welfare, or safety, protect the environment, ensure acceptable quality in products, whether produced for home use or export, ensure acceptable quality in any case where there is a restriction and choice of source of supply, require adequate information to be given to the consumer or user, and last but not least, prevent fraud or misrepresentation. Due to the widespread use and hazardous nature of faulty electrical appliances and the critical need to ensure safety and consumer protection, TTBS will recommend that this draft standard maintain its compulsory status, which is conferred by the Minister of Trade and Industry. Upon completion of the standard development process, TTBS will have the responsibility for ensuring that electrical appliances imported or used in Trinidad and Tobago demonstrate compliance to the final national compulsory standard. One requirement of the Standards Act is that draft national standards be used for public comment. Draft national standards be issued for public comment before they are finalized. Consequently, our standards development process incorporates a 60-day comment period, and TTBS provides several mechanisms for concerned parties to provide feedback on the draft standards. TTBS is hosting this webinar to increase awareness on the requirements of the draft national standard, with the aim of soliciting feedback from industry stakeholders in alignment with good regulatory practices. The feedback will be used as a key input into the standards development process to finalize the draft standard as a compulsory standard. The final compulsory standard, which is approved by the Minister of Trade and Industry, will be subsequently enforced under a mandatory conformity assessment program by the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards Conformity Assessment Divisions to verify compliance to the minimum requirements outlined in the standard. Currently, the TTBS's Implementation Division conducts enforcement activities related to electrical appliances based on inspection and market surveillance where necessary. The development and enforcement of this and other standards for the electrical sector is part of the Bureau's mandate to develop, enforce, and promote standards for the protection of public health, welfare, and safety, and the protection of the environment. Consequently, we expect that the robust implementation of the standard will result in the improved quality of electrical appliances for our population. In conclusion, I wish you all a very productive session, and please feel free to contribute your comments and recommendations towards the finalization of the draft electrical appliances standard. As a stakeholder, your involvement is integral to the integrity of the standardization process, and I encourage you to actively participate in this and other standards development projects as we work together to build our national quality infrastructure. Thank you for your attention and participation. And Kimberly, I will hand over back to you.
Thanks, Rodney, for that warm welcome. So moving right along, please allow me to welcome Ms. Nadita Ramachala. Ms. Nadita Ramachala is the manager of the Standardization Division at the TTBS, with over 15 years of experience in the development of Trinidad and Tobago standards, mainly in the area of electrical engineering. Ms. Ramachala was responsible for the formulation of a number of standards in the electrical field, including lighting products, electrical cables and appliances, and the National Electrical Wiring Code, as well as many renewable energy system standards. She holds a BSc degree from the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department from the University of the West Indies, as well as an MSc in Project Management, and she also holds an MBA. Her training includes standard development, quality management systems, energy management systems, as well as national quality infrastructure development. Please welcome Nadita Ramachala. Nadita?
Thank you, Kimberly. So welcome to all the participants. Please allow me one moment while I share my screen. So Kimberly, please confirm that you all can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I will just be doing a very quick recap of TTBS and the standards development process that we use. I know most of today's participants would have been exposed to TTBS already in some form or fashion, but to recap the salient points on our standards development process, I'll run through this presentation. So TTBS is a national standards body under the Standards Act number 18 of 1997. And we also have some other key roles, including the National Quality Certifying Body, National Laboratory Accreditation Body, as well as the National Measurement Institute. The role of the Measurement Institute is covered in the Metrology Act number 18 of 2004. And two key documents that we use to guide our operations would be one, the National Quality Policy, This document is available on the TTBS's website, so I encourage everyone to take a look at it. And we also have a national standardization strategy, and I will speak about that document a little later on. In
Lidita,
terms
sorry,
of TTBS's vision.
can you hear me? I think you might need to reshare because I'm seeing it, but I'm seeing it small.
Okay, no problem. So let me
Yeah.
stop the share.
Great,
Kimberly,
yes, I can see.
confirm?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
we're seeing it big
great.
now, yeah. Great.
Okay, so I'll just continue. So I would have covered the role of TTBS as a national standards body, as well as some of the key roles that we have. Just to add, we also fall under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And in terms of our vision, we would like to be the essential provider of national quality solutions, leading to a standards conscious society that is globally competitive. And we also have our mission to champion the development and implementation of standards, measurement systems, and conformity assessment services for the competitiveness and sustainability of Trinidad and Tobago. I know that many of you all would already be familiar with TTBS, but just to recap the different areas that we have within the TTBS to help us fulfill our mandate in the Standards Act, we are organized as follows. We have standardization covering national, regional, and international standardization. We also have metrology, and that is covering industrial, scientific, and legal metrology. For our compulsory standards, and Rodney would have spoken about our mandates under the Standards Act, we have our implementation division responsible for conducting inspections at the ports and in the business, so in the retail trade as well, where we can do the market surveillance. We also have our certification division offering certification for management systems, products, as well as tourism services. And certification also offers mandatory product certification schemes for certain products that fall under compulsory standards. For example, roofing sheets, liquid chlorine, bleach, cement, etc. To support the overall work of TTBS, we also have a number of laboratories in the areas of chemical, electrical, material, and fiber testing. And to recap again, the standards related mandates, according to the Standards Act number 18 of 1997, we are responsible for developing and maintaining standards, and generally our standards are developed to improve the quality of goods produced in the country or used in the country as well, to ensure industrial efficiency and development, and also to ensure public and industrial welfare, health, and safety. We have some standards that also cover the protection of the environment. To help us achieve this, we operate at different levels of standardization. So at the international level, TTBS would be the coordinating body and facilitate local input in ISO, which is the International Organization for Standardization. And there's another international body, the International Electrotechnical Commission, or the IEC. And here we would facilitate the participation of our national experts in their technical committees to ensure that we have a voice in the development of international standards. At the regional level, we have an organization called COPANT. It is also called the Pan American Standards Commission. Its primary purpose is to exchange best practices among standards bodies in Latin America, North America, and the Caribbean. And for our CARICOM region, we have the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, and this operates at the sub-regional level. It is part of our CARICOM arrangement to facilitate intra-regional trade. And of course, we have TTBS being at the national level. Just to recap on what is a standard, it is a technical document that provides an agreed upon repeatable way of doing something. So it provides a commonly accepted and repeatable way of defining objective technical requirements of products. So here I should note that standards can take several forms. We have standards that can take the form of a code, for example, an electrical wiring code. We also have a number of product-related standards. There are test methods, guidelines, guidance. So the type of standards can be very broad. When used effectively, standards can foster trade, protect public health and safety, preserve the environment, and promote innovation. And why standards? Standards are part of our everyday day life. So anything grown, produced, and traded subject to standards. There are wide applications of standards, from the mobile phone that we use to electrical appliances, to sustainability issues such as electric vehicles, renewable energy systems, etc. I wanted to highlight this particular slide, and at TTBS, we developed two types of national standards. And today we are speaking about a compulsory standard, and this is where TTBS has a regulatory responsibility. And generally, compulsory standards are developed when there's a health or safety issue, or we need to protect the environment, or we need to protect the consumer. And when standards are compulsory, this compulsory status is given to the standard by the Minister of Trade and Industry, and these requirements are legally enforceable by TTBS. Rodney would have highlighted that we generally use our inspection process for products that are imported, and for locally manufactured goods, we have product certification schemes that are being offered presently. For the voluntary standards, these would be examples of standards such as management systems. For example, you may be familiar with ISO 9001, and these standards represent minimum levels of acceptability for a product or service. So quality management systems, very popular. We also have environmental management systems, energy management systems, and these fall under the umbrella of voluntary standards. They can be used by businesses to improve their operations, to improve efficiency, to improve the environmental performance of the organization, and they are market driven. I would like to touch on the standards development process. So we use an internationally accepted process. So generally, whether it be at the national, regional, or international levels, the process steps are generally the same. So first, there is the need for a standard being identified. I would have mentioned our national standardization strategy, and this is our 3-year program of our make request to TTBS if there's a problem in the market, or say electrical failures with products and devices, or if there's an urgent market need for standards, and we would look at the requests and add it to our portfolio of standards that we're working on for the year. In some cases, we may add it to our 3-year work program, depending on what the project is, how critical the need is, and what steps can be taken by TTBS to accelerate the process as well. After that, we will conduct technical and market research, then go into preparing the draft standard. We would also constitute what we call a specification committee. And here, for voluntary standards, we would assemble a group of experts to assist in the drafting, and this is on a voluntary basis. For compulsory standards, this is where TTBS has a regulatory role. So we would constitute an advisory committee to ensure that the interests of our inspection which is the implementation division, would be represented, our certification division, lab services, and in some cases, depending on if there's a need to collaborate with any other regulators, we would also invite these key ministries or agencies. The one distinction that I would like to make between our voluntary and compulsory standards is that our voluntary process is consensus-based, and our compulsory standards represent technical regulations, and these are legally enforceable. In that capacity, we act as a regulator, and TTBS and its board, then the Ministry of Trade would take the final decision on the content of a standard. So we would use a consultative process like this one, where we would invite stakeholders to provide comments on the draft requirements. And this is normally done during our public comment period, which is a minimum of 60 days. Here, we would advertise the draft standard for comment in the newspaper. We would also issue it on social media and reach out directly to key stakeholders who would be affected. After we undergo the public comment period and host our stakeholder engagements, receive comments, then we would look at resolving the comments. Once the comments are addressed, and it is important that when stakeholders submit comments to provide a technical justification. So if there are any particular changes, it has to be substantiated by practices in another jurisdiction based on the principles of health, safety, environmental protection. So there has to be a substantive technical justification for us to consider the comment. When we receive that type of information, we would have our committee review it and then determine which comments we accept or reject. And then we would seek to finalize the standard. After that, we have some approval processes, and these are internal approvals where we have the technical and marketing committee, which is a subcommittee of our board of directors, reviewing the content and making a recommendation that goes to our board of directors, and the board, they're responsible for declaring all national standards. If the standard is voluntary, we move on to publication. If the standard is compulsory, as I indicated, the Minister of Trade would be responsible for giving that compulsory status to the standard. I wanted to highlight what we call good standardization practice and the difference and the similarities between regulations. Now, internationally, standards are recognized to be voluntary. At TTBS, we develop compulsory standards, and these essentially fall under the category of technical regulations. Therefore, TTBS would have that legal role. So we have to ensure that there's transparency, openness, meaning that we would consult with stakeholders and get feedback into the process. We have to look at impartiality, consensus, effectiveness, relevance. For the good policy making practice, or when we look at the development of compulsory standards, technical regulations, I would have indicated that we consult with stakeholders. So we do not seek consensus from stakeholders on the compulsory standards. Instead, we use a consultative process. That is why it is very important that stakeholders submit a technical justification to us, and this could be based on the practices in other countries, other standards that may be used internationally, if there are any salient health and safety issues, electrical safety issues that we need to consider. So we need to have that type of technical information provided during the public comment stage. And I should say that after we close off on our public comment period, it is very difficult to make changes. We would have to go through the entire standards development process again. So we really want to encourage you to submit comments now. So this is the time to provide all your feedback. And even if it is to say that you have no objection or even agreement with the requirements. So Kimberly will be speaking later about the technical requirements. What we have tried to do is keep our process up to date in terms of the reference standards, because in the case of electrical appliances, we are primarily importing products from different countries. Again, in terms of application of standards, we have the compulsory standards supporting the TTBS's regulatory mandate. And this standard is one example where we have a very robust inspection scheme. We would have the implementation division presenting on the general process that is used. And again, to make the distinction between the compulsory and voluntary standards can be used in a regulatory way by another state agency or ministry if it is incorporated into the regulatory scheme. And one example would be the very familiar electrical wiring code, which is voluntary for TTBS, but it is enforced by the Electrical Inspectorate Division under the Ministry of Public Utilities. And a number of standards, such as the management system standards, can be used for certification, and they can generally be used by businesses to improve their processes. So standards that are voluntary can also be referenced in national policies, contract documents, within the procurement process itself to support testing activities, again mentioning the certification bodies and how important that is, as well as accreditation, which looks primarily at labs and conformity assessment bodies. I would have highlighted earlier the National Standardization Strategy. It is a 3-year work program for the TTBS. It was developed based on an international methodology from ISO, and we would have collected statistical data as well as consulted stakeholders, looked at government initiatives and any areas where there's significant social impact to help us determine what would be those priority projects. We are coming to the close of the 2022, so we will be collecting additional stakeholder information to help us reprioritize for the next 3 years. And the document would be available on our TTBS website for review. So please take a look at it and send us any feedback that you may have. In terms of emerging areas of standardization, I would mention that we participate in ISO and IEC. So we keep abreast of the developments at the international level. There's a lot of focus on sustainability, climate change. So we're looking at net zero guiding principles. So there's an international document that will be developed for net zero. We have also been engaged in international standardization with regard to governance of organizations, and we are completing the adoption of 4 international standards that are related to governance. We are also looking at the circular economy, innovation management, and very topical would be that issue of digital transformation and how technology is being used to basically enhance the industries that we traditionally have, whether it be from manufacturing, the use of AI, blockchain, very important concepts that we need to pay attention to. And also the issue of sustainability, the UN Sustainable Development Goals and our own Vision 2030, where we need to look at sustainability within materials, processes, systems. So that is the end of my very brief presentation. So I will stop the sharing now and I will turn the session back to Kimberly. If there are any questions, we have a session dedicated for the Q&A. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nadita, for your presentation. I'm sure everybody here learned something new. So next on the agenda is my presentation. So please allow me 10 seconds to share my screen. Confirming everyone can see.
Yes, Kimberly.
Yeah, okay, great. One second, I just need to, right. So I'm here today to speak about the public comment draft Trinidad and Tobago Compulsory Standard 2420XX, Electrical Appliances Compulsory Requirements. As I mentioned, my name is Kimberly Badlu. I'm a Standards Officer in the Standardization Division. I've worked here for about 9 years, and I've worked on most of the electrical standards. So this standard covers most of the electrical or domestic electrical appliances, I should say. So a little bit on the history of the electrical appliances standard. The first standard was produced way back in 1988. It was then revised in 2005 and with a new name, TTS Part 13, 2005, which may be what everyone here knows it as currently. It was again revised in 2010 and it was revised in 2016. This revision included requirements for the labeling of refrigerant information for appliances containing refrigerants. And here we are today with this draft standard, TTCS 24. So this standard, as you would notice, has a different name. It's the same standard, it's revised, but it has a Trinidad and Tobago compulsory standard because it's a new regime we are trying to start here at TTBS. All our compulsory standards will be named Trinidad and Tobago compulsory standard for ease of understanding for everyone else. So what is PCTTCS? Yes, it's a mouthful. It stands for Public Comment Trinidad and Tobago Compulsory Standard. And this standard is the 24th compulsory standard that we've produced since we've started it. It's a national standard that specifies the safety requirements for all electrical appliances produced, imported, and used in TNT. It's intended to be used with the most recent versions of the internationally accepted standards, including those developed by UL and IEC. As I stated just now, the intention is that it will replace TTS 76 Part 13, 2016 requirements for labeling of electrical appliances. So who is responsible for this standard? Well, as it's a compulsory standard, it will be enforced by the TTBS. Therefore, the committee responsible was the Advisory Committee for Electrical Appliances, which comprises the conformity assessment divisions at TTBS. And these are the Implementation Division, Certification, Lab Services Division, and Standardization. So the contents of the standard. So this is where we are getting into what is actually in the standard. It has the scope, normative references, terms and definition, general requirements, as I mentioned before, the refrigerants clause, specific requirements for electrical appliances, mechanism to demonstrate compliance, as well as measures related to non-compliance. And then it has one normative annex for electrical appliances requirements. This national standard specifies the safety requirement for all electrical appliances produced, imported, or used in Trinidad and Tobago. It also specifies the labeling information to be placed on the appliance, as well as information to be placed on the packaging. So the standard applies to appliances intended for use at 115 volts or 230 volts. So the exceptions to the scope of the standard is that this standard does not cover appliances designed exclusively for industrial purposes or appliances intended to be used in locations where it may be corrosive or an explosive atmosphere may be present. And the standard also does not apply to lighting products or electrical accessories or components. Those standards will be dealt with similarly, but in different compulsory standards. So the normative references for this document. So we have tried this time to address these standards in a unique way. So this standard references many documents, and they are indispensable to the application of the standard. For undated references, the latest edition of the reference documents apply. So this standard, as I mentioned before, references several internationally accepted documents, including standards developed by the IEC and the UL. To view this list, you can go to ttbs.com/EA-standards list. If you do go to that list, it's a web link, which will show you this table here. So as I said, we're doing this slightly differently. Previously, we would have had all of these product standards individually adopted by TTBS. However, in order to avoid having to revise each single standard whenever it's revised internationally, we are trying to adopt this approach where we have a dynamic list, which can be updated at any point in time by the Bureau to include any standards that may be new or any standards that may be revised. So this is, if you go to that link before, this is what you will see. That link is also included in the document, the standard. So I'll speak a little more about that link, that table in clause 6. So clause 3 deals with the terms and definitions for the standard. So one of the terms and definition is electrical appliance. And this is an item of electrical or electronic equipment normally built in standardized sizes or types, which is installed as a unit to perform one or more functions, but does not include electrical luminaires or electrical components. So some types of electrical appliances could be fans, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, heaters, toasters, electric cookers, video and audio equipment, and even computers. So while these terms may have slightly different meanings in the industry, the way they are regulated by the TTBS remains the same. So whether a product is rebuilt, reconditioned, refurbished, remanufactured, renewed, it is treated the same way, meaning that it has to comply to the same requirements. Therefore, we have defined them generally as goods which have been overhauled, repaired, refitted, or have undergone a similar process to be made reusable and to meet the applicable technical requirements or regulatory requirements. So this product can be refurbished by the manufacturer, an authorized representative of the manufacturer, or a third party authorized by the manufacturer. Also, some common industry terms include factory refurbished, certified refurbished. So certified refurbished is normally done by an authority representative of the manufacturer or retailer. And factory refurbished is normally done by the manufacturer. So this is why we didn't want to split hairs and separate each one, because regardless of what type of overhaul or repairing was completed, it will be regulated the same way. It has to comply to the same requirements. So similarly, secondhand goods and used goods has their own definition, and these will not be lumped into the rebuilt, reconditioned terms. This is a separate, distinct definition. So these are goods that have been in service, leased or owned, and are re-entering the market for sale. So we wanted to make that clear and define it in this document. So now we move to the labeling requirements. So where did we get these requirements? You will probably be familiar because I believe this was slightly updated, if any at all, from the previous version. And we are currently trying to harmonize, as far as possible, all of our labeling standards. So these would be in line with the standards that are currently in draft stage, our labeling of goods and prepackaged goods standards. So all of these requirements across the board, we're trying to keep them very similar. So the name, a registered trademark, country of origin, model number, serial number, indication of whether electrical appliances was built, reconditioned, refurbished, remanufactured, or renewed. So this is a new item here. And we wanted to make sure that it was stated, whatever it was, but we want to make sure that it's actually stated on the labeling, so we will know how to deal with it in our assessment. It also needs to have the indication of whether the electrical appliance is used or secondhand. The voltage, rated voltage, current, a certification or safety certification mark, and hazard warnings. So speaking of those hazard warnings, we have a clause for the caution markings. And caution markings intended to inform the user of potential risk shall be prefixed by the signal word caution, warning, danger. Where applicable, a caution marking intended to instruct the user shall be legible and visible. So it shall also display the configuration, if applicable, and the servicing warning shall be located visible or immediately upon removal of the protective shield, where applicable. So all labeling shall be clear, legible, and in the English language. Of course, having a secondary language is a plus, but it has to have the English language. If graphics are used, they shall be in accordance with ISO 7000 or IEC 60417. And the packaging. The functionality of the electrical appliance, a brief product descriptions and conditions shall be marked. Special handling instructions should be placed, and also an indication of whether the appliance was reconditioned, remanufactured, or refurbished. So let's talk about the refrigerants clause. Appliances containing refrigerants shall bear an indication of the following. This clause has not changed from the 2016 version, so you all should be very familiar with it. The common name or chemical name of the refrigerant, the composition if applicable, this would be for blends, mass or pressure characteristics, special hazards, handling requirements, or flammability if applicable. So here's the meat of this standard. The electrical appliances shall comply with standard that is recognized by the TTBS. Annex A, if you recall the normative annex, provides a non-exhaustive list of standards recognized by TTBS. This list is constantly updated to include new standards. Electrical appliances shall comply with the most recent list published on the TTBS website. And there is that link again. In the event that the appliance is not covered, these appliances shall be treated on a case-by-case basis. And you can see clause 7.1.2, and I'll discuss that in a later slide. And then electrical appliances designated as e-waste shall not enter the market. So what we have done here is Annex A will provide all of the product standards that we would have previously adopted separately in a list, which makes it easy for importers, retailers, everyone, manufacturers, to keep track of which standards we are using for what appliance. It's also supposed to make our lives easier as well, because we'll have all the standards housed in one document and online, which will make it easier to update as well as to consult. So the mechanisms to demonstrate compliance. This was separated into 3 categories because it's really 3 different ways that we deal with appliances on the market. We have new electrical appliances, We have other than new, which would include rebuilt, remanufactured, refurbished, all the reasons. Used and secondhand is the third category. So let's move on to the new electrical appliances. Locally manufactured and imported electrical appliances shall comply with the requirements outlined in clauses 4, 5, and 6 of the standard. And TTBS shall verify compliance to the standard, and all electrical appliances under the scope shall be subject to mandatory conformity assessment program administered by TTBS. The appliances shall carry a product certification mark. So this demonstrates compliance to the standard. And in the event that the electrical appliance of similar types are manufactured to a different standard from the ones in Annex A, the TTBS, both the standard and the certification mark shall be approved by TTBS. And the product shall be functionally compatible with our local wiring code, which is TTS 171 Part 1. And they shall also be accompanied by a certification mark and documentation to demonstrate functional compatibility. TTBS reserves the right to sample. Sorry, let me just move this. So TTBS reserves the right to sample and request reference samples at the expense of the local manufacturer, importer, and distributor. So let's deal with other than new. This is all REs, remanufactured, refitted, renewed. Electrical appliances categorized other than new. All goods that are not categorized as new based on clause 4.1.2e shall be subject to sampling and testing for compliance at the expense of the manufacturer, importer, or distributor. So, however, TTBS may consider documentation provided by the manufacturer, importer, or distributor of goods. So documentation includes test reports, inspection reports, and conformity assessment reports. So Irvin will probably cover this in his presentation later on, so you'll hear more about the conformity assessment of the standard. And then we have used or secondhand products. All goods that are categorized as used or secondhand are imported, donated, or offered for sale in Trinidad and Tobago. TTBS reserves the right to sample and test goods on a 100% compulsory, 100% basis for compliance, So measures related to non-compliance. Where locally manufactured or imported appliances are found to be in breach of any of the requirements outlined in clause 4, TTBS shall initiate any of the following actions. So TTBS can direct the manufacturer to remove the non-conforming electrical appliances throughout Trinidad and Tobago. They could seize and detain, they could permit modifications, they could prohibit sale, and they could direct the manufacturer, importer, distributor to initiate a product recall. And any breaches to this standard are subject to fines and penalties as outlined in the Standards Act. I hope none of you are familiar with those fees, but I'm sure some of you are. So one requirement of the Standards Act is that the draft standard has to be issued for public comment before they are finalized. Consequently, our standard development process incorporates a 60-day public comment period, at the beginning of which 3 newspaper ads are published in our national papers. And these public comment ads for the electrical appliances were published on May 23rd, 24th, and 25th. We have also updated the standard and uploaded it to the TTBS website with a link to submit comments. And we notified the WTO on the 7th of June. And today we are having the stakeholder consultation to reach anybody else we may have missed. And we are hoping that you all can submit your feedback and give us your thoughts on the standard. So how do you comment on this standard? Well, it's very, very easy. We have extended the public comment period to Friday, 12th of August to facilitate this stakeholder consultation happening today. And we've given you an extra week to submit your comments. The draft can be viewed at gottbs.com, or if you can remember this address, I'll probably put it in the chat as well. you can go directly to tinyurl.com/electapp-comment, and you'll have the online form to submit comments, and you'll also have the standard for view only. Or you could send me an email. Send me your comments, justifications, as Nadita would have mentioned previously, and we will take them into consideration at the committee level. And that's all for me. I will now introduce our next speaker. We have a slight shift in our program. So we'll move on to Mr. Kevin Grant from Certification, because I think Nadine is having some issues. So Kevin, I hope you're ready. I'm going to introduce you now. Mr. Kevin Grant.
That is not a problem.
Great, Kevin. So Mr. Kevin Grant is an electrical engineer with a passion for renewable and sustainable energy systems. Mr. Grant obtained a BAsC in Utilities Engineering from UTT, where he specialized in electrical engineering. He also has a master's from the UE in renewable energy technology. Kevin is a licensed electrician with an immediate past chairman of the IEEE Trinidad and Tobago section. He has over 20 years experience at the TTBS, and he has worked in the certification division of TTBS, as well as the laboratory services division and the metrology division. And most recently, he is transferred to the certification division. While at TTBS, Kevin was able to increase his competence as a management systems auditor, specializing in ISO 9001, 17025, and 17021. So Kevin, I pass the floor on to you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning, everyone. Just confirming that you are hearing my voice and seeing my screen.
Confirming we can see it, Kevin.
Okay, great. So this is a brief presentation on the certification division. So, my slide is not moving. 1 second. Right, there we go. All right. So, the TTBS is governed by the Standards Act and other regulations. So where does certification fit into this? If you look at the Standard Act, you will see TTBS listed as the National Laboratory Accreditation Body, the National Standards Body, and also the National Quality Certifying Body. All right? So some of you all may be asking, what is certification? So it is a conformity assessment activity where an independent and impartial third-party organization, right, that is us, the certification body, attests that the items conform to the requirements, right? So the intent is to assure interested parties that the items will meet certain needs and expectations. And this could be applied to products, services and processes, management system, and personnel, all right? Its purpose. So credible certification services can help economic activities such as improve the goods produced, ensure industrial efficiency and development, promote public and industrial welfare, health and safety, and also to protect the environment. So we are here today to talk about the electrical appliance compulsory requirements, and Kimberly would have touched on the name and the proposed standard, and she would have also mentioned that it replaces TTS 76 Part 13 of 2016. So our acting executive director would have touched on this before, right? So in terms of a compulsory standard, or referred to as technical regulation, we want to protect the consumer or user against danger to health and safety. We want to protect public or industrial health, welfare, or safety. We definitely want to protect the environment. We want to ensure acceptable quality in products, whether produced for home use or export. And we want to ensure acceptable quality in cases where there is restriction in choice of source of supply, require adequate information to be given to the consumer or user. We want to prevent fraud or misrepresentation arising from misleading advertising or labeling. And this is taken from our Standard Act, which is Act number 18 of 1997. And this from 8G was taken from section 18 of that. Right, so what are the mechanisms to demonstrate compliance? So electrical appliances shall carry a product certification mark approved by TTBS, which demonstrates compliance to the standard. TTBS shall verify compliance to the standard, and electrical appliances under the scope of the standard shall be subjected to a mandatory conformity assessment program administered by TTBS. So it could take the form of inspection, testing, certification, or it could be a combination of any or all of these activities. So we talk about certification mark, and what we're doing here is that we just want to show some examples of what a certification mark looks like. I am hopeful or hoping that most of you all present here today are familiar with some of these marks, and there may be others. All right. So if we draw attention to the UL mark on the left, you would see C, EU, and US. Basically, that is saying that that UL certification mark is acceptable in Canada, the US, and the European Union. All right. So the safety certification mark, which we're discussing here, I am saying that all electrical products will have one or more safety certifications on their product if made by a legitimate manufacturer. If the certification mark is present only on the packaging but not on the product, there is a good chance that the product certification mark is not genuine. So you may be wondering how the products get certified. So manufacturers would send their new products to be tested for safety. The recognized testing laboratories, some of which we showed in the previous slide, evaluates the product and certify that it meets the requirements of the standard. Certified products are periodically evaluated to ensure continued compliance with the standard. So in terms of the process, in order to attain a certificate, the system, product, or services must be evaluated in order to obtain evidence that it conforms to the necessary requirements. These evaluations may take the form of audits, inspections, testing, and surveillance activity. And this is what is demonstrated in this image there above. So there would be an application, right? There will be some planning involved by the certifying body. So it could take the form of audits and inspection, sampling and testing, and surveillance activity. And at the end of that, your product could be certified. You also have the option of suspension of certification, withdrawal of certification, or a reduction to scope. What do we do here in the certification division at TTBS? This is just to give you a snapshot. The quality management system, which a lot of you may be familiar with, is the 9001-2015. And there I show the certification mark. We also have the environmental management system. Both the QMS in terms of 9001 and the EMS, they are both voluntary. The product certification is mandatory, right? So some of the products you could look at for the mandatory certification mark would be like liquid chlorine bleach, safety matches, and roofing sheets. We also do certification in the tourism sector, and this is also voluntary. What we look at in terms of tourism, we're looking at accommodation. So that's hotels, guest houses, bed and breakfast, and self-catering facilities. We also look at tour guides and tour operators. And of course, like many presenters before, we play our part in contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So some of the key things we'd look at is industry, innovation and infrastructure, good health and well-being, responsible consumption and production, and of course, climate action, right? The certification division of the TTBS has embarked upon a project to become accredited, all right? And we are being accredited to ISO IEC 17021 Part 1. And that standard speaks about conformity assessment requirements for bodies providing audit, certification of management systems. So this project applies to the following certification programs offered by TTBS. So right now it's 9001, Quality Management System. We're looking at product certification programs and the evaluation of quality management system. The aim is to eventually have all the services of the certification division accredited, but we are taking it on a step-by-step basis. All right, so the project is part of the development of TTBS. And what will it do? It will increase the credibility of our certification program with stakeholders, international recognition and acceptance of certification results, improved operational effectiveness and efficiency, increased customer satisfaction, and the development of a national and regional quality infrastructure. That brings me to the end of my brief presentation on the certification division. For general inquiries, you can email us at certification@ttbs.org.tt. I look forward to answering any questions, any question and answer sessions. If you have any, thank you for your time and attention. And I will now turn you back over to Kimberly. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for that very informative presentation. And from certification, we move straight into implementation with Irvin Buchun doing his presentation. Irvin holds a BSc in Chemistry and Environmental and Natural Resource Management with over 10 years experience as an inspector at TTBS. He's a certified quality inspector and also holds a diploma in electrical installations, as well as other management, quality, refrigeration, and electrical certificates. He's part of the enforcement team who regulates the suite of electrical standards and is also involved with the anti-counterfeiting and illicit trade regulation. Irvin, please welcome Irvin Buchun. Irvin, you may begin.
I just want to confirm that you see my screen, right?
Yes, we're seeing it.
All right. Okay. So all protocols observed. Good morning, all. So I'm Irvin, as I was introduced there. So I would be presenting on the inspection process for electrical appliances. All right. So getting right into it, the implementation division, as mentioned before, is the conformity assessment arm of the TTBS responsible for implementation of compulsory standards for the preservation of safety and health of consumers and the environment. So this is achieved through inspections, market surveillance, non-conformance management, and the monitoring of processes, products, practices, services. The division is also involved with consultation and public education in the context of engagement mainstreaming, right? So we've heard previous speakers talk about NQI, ESG, gender, and the SDGs and so on, right? So that's very important to have alignment. The authority of the inspection body is derived, again, the same Standards Act, Chapter 8203, and the regulations made therein, right? So these are some of the clauses, right? Some of the sections of the Act as it relates to the ability to charge fees, the powers to inspect, seize, etc., and the summary offenses and confidentiality. Right, so the division is also accredited to ISO IEC 17020 of 2012, and the standard outlines the requirements for the operation of various types of inspection bodies and provides the confidence that the conformity assessment process would be competent and impartial and consistent, as well as some of the other benefits of accreditation that Kevin would have mentioned previously. So the inspection process. So the appliance and safety products subunit of the implementation division is responsible for inspection of electrical appliances. The process in its current dispensation commences at the point of import with the screening of customs entries via the single electronic window TTBS link. And at this point, it is crucial that you, being the importers, provide the necessary documentation such as invoices, certificates, and letters for the processing of the import declaration. A risk-based approach is taken regarding the level and location of the inspection. That is, high-risk goods are examined at the ports of entry, cess stations, customs bonded areas. Medium risk items would be held for inspection at the premises. And here it is critical that you would contact TTBS to arrange the inspection when goods are received and are available. Lower risk items are provisionally released to be monitored through market surveillance or via the remote inspection program, which is currently being launched. So the item inspection itself, and that typically begins with the cross-referencing of the goods presented with the import documents like the invoice and stuff. like that, and following which the label assessment would be conducted. Where applicable, samples are taken as evidence or to verify certification marks, as Kevin described before. And sampling is also done to verify documentation in the case of refurbished, recertified, etc. And also for further assessment and testing via the TTBS laboratory or external labs. Testing is allowed for items without acceptable certification, or in some cases, the submission of third-party test documents from an accredited body is also permissible. Where label or item modifications are required, this would be verified through inspection or re-inspection rather, and if conformance is achieved, then the release will be granted. If conformance, however, cannot be achieved, items would be destroyed or reshipped to the point of origin in accordance with local statutes as guided by the relevant authorities such as the EMA. Importers or proprietors can also reserve the right to appeal the inspection decisions via our complaints and appeals portal found on the website. So lastly, use appliances, and I had highlighted to denote alignment to the definitions given previously. I mentioned refurbished, certified a bit before. So these would undergo additional safety checks via a portable appliance tester or PATA seen on the screen. And this is done to verify the electrical integrity of the device. The tests include inter alia bonding, insulation resistance, and leakage, and so on. So corrective and preventive action. So this table summarizes some of the common nonconformances and the corresponding corrective actions typically taken. To reiterate, label deficiencies shall be corrected via relabeling and verification. And the lack of a certification mark, or this will trigger further testing or assessment. Again, if non-conformances cannot be corrected, items would not be permitted to the market, and where applicable, recalls would be instituted. In the case of false safety or certification marks, though, this would present a much more grave situation, and this would be exacted by reshipping or destruction of these items. Regarding the testing, so a common test deficiency is the failure of the input test, which is really a misalignment of the ratings with the measured values. So in that case, up to a specified tolerance limit, relabeling will be typically allowed. With the part testing of the used items, a common failure would be the earthing, which normally would require repair and retesting to confirm that the repairs were satisfactory. However, a proactive approach is encouraged to be taken to prevent the shipment of non-conforming items to our waters. This would be done via the pre-assessment of representative samples submitted to the TTBS. And again, I can't stress enough that this measure would prevent a lot of the disquiet associated with non-conformances and therefore strongly recommended. So finally, so I'll close by providing a brief overview of what is expected for the rollout of the updated compulsory standard. So following the publication of the compulsory standards order, a subsequent engagement will be conducted, and that will table the timelines for enforcement, details of the inspection regime, the associated fees and penalties, and how we intend to treat with non-conformances. So that's it. So I thank you for your attention today, and I'll close by just leaving some contact information for the unit, which is headed by Mr. Larry Gopichan. And queries related to appliance inspections can be submitted to the unit email in the middle, and well, general implementation division concerns can be sent to the division email below. So look forward to the questions in the Q&A segment. Thank you. Back to you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Irvin, very much for that overview. So please allow me to apologize for the change in today's agenda. Ms. Nadine Jeffrey is experiencing some technical difficulties and cannot speak today at today's session. In her stead, however, we have the ever capable and always willing Mr. Dudnath Singh. Mr. Dudnath Singh is a standards officer in the Electrical Products Laboratory and manages the Energy Efficiency Lighting Lab at TTBS. He has worked at TTBS for the past 14 years in different capacities, from being a lab assistant to technician to acting as lab superintendent and managing projects projects in capacity building of new testing areas. He attended UTT, where he attained a diploma in electrical and electronics engineering technology in 2006. He recently graduated from the same institution with honors and attained a BSc in the field of electrical engineering. Mr. Singh has to his name a wide range and skill set in testing, quality, energy management, and energy efficiency, just to name a few. So please welcome Mr. Dudnath Singh.
Hi, good morning all. Kimberly, can you confirm that you're hearing me?
I'm hearing you fine, Dudnath. You may begin.
Okay, thank you. So good morning once again. So I'll be doing the presentation on behalf of Ms. Nadine Jeffries, who is the manager in charge of the Electrical Products Laboratory. Today we would give you, I would give you a layout of how the lab is run in the Electrical Products Laboratory, and in terms of what the lab's capability is as it pertains to the labeling standard. So just an overview of the Lab Services Division. So the Lab Services Division is has arranged in 4 laboratories. So we have the Chemical Laboratory, the Fiber Products Laboratory, the Electrical Products Laboratory, and the Materials Laboratory. In these laboratories, we assess labeling as well as we conduct performance testing on a wide range of products. Next slide. With regards to labeling and why labeling is so critical to be on appliances is to identify the item, to determine the standard for the testing capabilities, to determine the settings to select for the physical tests, as well as to compare with the physical test results that the test item is or does what it's stated. So conditions for labels, where and how. So as per the labeling standard, we look at clause 4.1.1, where we look at the indelibility of the labels, the durability in terms of how conspicuous the label is and the legibility of the labeling. In 4.1.2, we look at where the label is appeared on the item. It regards to 4.3, we look on the labels to make sure that it is in English language and lettering, as well as the established graphical symbols. Also, we conduct the labeling assessment on the packaging as well for these items. Specific information. What information is needed? So on the labels, we would look for the identification of the product, the description of the product, the model number, as well as the serial number where it is applicable. As well as we would look for the source of the item, the company name, brand, or the distributor, and the country of origin. With regards to specific information in terms of the electrical aspect, we look for the electrical ratings, the nature of the voltage, which is very important with regards to the testing as it relates to if it's a 120 volt supply or if it's a 220 voltage supply. We also look at the current value in terms of our testing to compare the results as it relates to the current amperage of the items as well as to the specifications as per the standard. And we look at the value of the frequency, which is 60 hertz as we use in Trinidad. Sometimes there is 50, 60 hertz, so that is applicable as well. We also look at the caution markings on the item for regards to safety. The markings may be written or graphical, signal words, which needs to be on the labeling as well in terms of caution, warning, or danger. Another aspect which we look at is in terms of the outlet on an item. And this is in relation to if you're looking at decorative lights. So you would have an outlet on the extreme end of the string of lights. So we'd look at these labels to see if it's the same voltage rating out, or we'll look at the current rating as well. And we also look at grounding for these items as well. As per the labeling standard, there is a clause which relates to refrigerant. So the laboratory, in terms of its assessment, will do the assessment as it relates to the type of refrigerant which is used in specific appliances. As it relates to the packaging of appliances, the laboratory also does assessment in terms of the packaging, identification, the functions of the particular appliance, as well as for special handling and other not done by the laboratory. With regards to the testing aspect of the laboratory, we conduct different types of tests, and these are physical performance testing for safety. So we do safety tests as it relates to leakage current tests, starting current tests. We do some performance testing, as well as we do the input current tests and power and voltage withstand testing, as well as we conduct some functional tests as per the different types of appliances. We want to check the risks so that you do not be exposed to any electric shock or any electric dangers as it relates to these electrical items. With regards to the competence of the lab, only persons who have performed the tests applicable on spare items can test customers' items. We also conduct inter-lab comparisons to show that there are no deviations within our test methods or test procedures as it relates to the competence of the staff within the electrical laboratory. We do periodic checks on our equipment to make sure that they are reliable, repeatable for testing and producing testing results, and they are calibrated as per our calibration schedule, which we have for all our equipment. So every year, we make sure that all our equipment are calibrated and are properly functional to produce acceptable results. With regard to the laboratory, our laboratory is accredited to the ISO 17025:2015. Tests on appliances are not accredited, but all work is performed consistently through the accreditation process. With regards to our accreditation, we have checks and balances with regards to our documentation, processes, reviews, non-conforming investigations, and more are applied. So this is in relation to appliances in your possession. So we test only new appliances. It is your responsibility to use your appliances for safety. Safe actions. A lot of risks do not come with signs. So as we could see from the picture indicating on the left-hand side, that there's an overload of a circuit, and this is not really applicable and safe for use. So we need to bear in mind that when we are using appliances, we need to use it in the right voltage source, and we need to know that we don't overload circuits because it's for your safety. As it relates to damaged appliances, there should be no cracks or broken insulation. So with regards to appliances, you need to check and inspect your appliances periodically to make sure that there are no damages to the cord or to the plug outlet, as well as notice if they make additional sound. So if there's any strange sounds emanating from your appliances, there's an indication that there may be some part that is damaged or it's breaking down, as well as you should never be shooting sparks. So in terms of appliances, in terms of the checks for your appliance, so you need to check these appliances periodically to make sure that the pins on your plugs are not corroded or they are not rusty, because these because when you plug it into your outlet, this could cause a short circuit and it could become hazardous to you as well as the item. So with regards to the compulsory status of the TTCS 24 electrical appliances. Your feedback is important to improve this standard. And without your feedback, we cannot do without you in terms of understanding what will be your needs and how we could address them within this new updated standard. So with your feedback, it will help us to go a long way in terms of benefiting to you, the public, to you, the manufacturers, the retailers, and the distributors, in terms of a standard that is applicable to you and your use in your daily operations for the sales of your products. So thank you very much. And we look forward to your feedback with regards to this standard.
Thank you very much, Judnath, for stepping in and informing the stakeholders of the key testing requirements for electrical appliances. At this time, I would like to turn the floor over to Ms. Nadita Ramachala to begin our question and answer session. Nadita?
Thank you, Kimberly. What I'd like to ask you to do is pull up the draft standard as well so that we can directly go to any areas of concern. So
Sure.
we invite persons to raise their hands and ask questions directly, or questions can be posted in the chat. So there are a couple of questions already. So in the meanwhile, I invite persons to raise their hands if they want to raise their question directly with us. So in the meantime, I will go to one of the questions that came in, and the question is, what is the upper power rating limit for an item to be considered an electrical appliance? So Kimberly, for that question, perhaps you can go to the scope. So our preliminary response to this is that in the way that we have defined the scope, the appliances are designated in terms of the voltage ratings. So we did not include an upper power rating limit in the scope. What we have done is that we have referenced a number of standards, as Kimberly would have indicated in her presentation. So my question would be, if there's any suggestion, please send us those suggestions in writing. When we look at the type of appliances that we cover, there's normally an indication of the type of appliance and the scope. And I would just like Kimberly to go to the section on the definitions. So. Right, so we have used a very general definition for electrical appliances because there may be some variation from appliance to appliance. The approach that we're taking is a broad-based approach, and we would have to go to the very specific product standard that is listed. So as Kimberly indicated, we would have a list of the different appliances, and we would have the relevant standards being available to the importers or the manufacturers to review. Okay, so Mr. Madhu Hossain, I don't know if you wanted to raise any questions directly, but the way that we have approached this particular standard is that we have included a number of different appliances, and we have used the voltage ratings to distinguish the different types of appliance. And we would have also removed the word domestic as well from the scope and the title of the standard. So if there are no further issues on that one, I will go to the next question. And it came in from Giselle. Where can we find an up-to-date, I guess, list of certification marks approved or recognized by TTBS? So I will turn that question over to Mr. Buchun. It is a practice that we did have in the past. And what we have looked at in this particular case is that we would have to do the assessment on an individual basis or case-by-case basis, because a key requirement is that both the certification mark and the standard has to be approved by TTBS. Irvin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything further.
Yes, that's correct. I think Larry wanted to add something to that as well.
Okay, and Giselle has, okay, so I will let Giselle go ahead,
Okay,
and then
sure.
Larry could respond.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I understand, I guess now the NOM and CTL and ETL as they used to be for the domestic electrical appliances, TTS 76 Part 13 would no longer be pre-defaulted approved, I guess. What I'm understanding is we would have to go on a case by case. So if, say, for instance, we would want to have NOM or CTL approved, where can we find would that be considered an equivalency review, or like what would the steps to do that would be? Unfortunately, in other standards and in other stakeholders meetings like toys, we had requested to obtain the process to do that, and we never got it. So we are not clear on how to go by approving other certification marks.
Thank you, Giselle, for that question. So we would have had a practice, and it's still currently being done, and Larry will go into the details of the different certification marks that are accepted. If Kimberly could just go down to the listing of the standards. So what we would have tried to do here is list the main standards. So for example, IEC 60335. There's part 1, there's part 2, and there are multiple parts that comprise all the requirements for electrical safety. Now, these suite of standards from the IEC are issued by the International Electrotechnical Commission, and each country can determine which standards they adopt at the national level. So there may be slight differences from each country, although they might use the IEC 60335 as the basis of their national standards. There could be slight differences depending on the country that the product is being sourced from. So we would have to do it on a case-by-case basis. So I'll turn it over to Larry, because we didn't go into the very specific, we didn't go into all the jurisdictions and say like Mexican or Colombian or China to list all the individual standards. But there is that process of equivalency. And what we would normally do is just ensure that if there are any deviations, that the appliance can be used within Trinidad and Tobago, because we would have to check that it wasn't designed for like a 50 hertz system, and we'd have to check the voltage ratings as we indicated before from the scope. So go ahead, Giselle.
Yes, thank you. I guess the question more goes into is there a specific format? Like we are used to doing equivalency on standards. We do it in Colombia, we do it in Costa Rica, we do it in Salvador and Panama. So we are familiar with the process. I just have not been able to obtain the actual documentation that needs to be submitted to TTBS. I don't have, like, for instance, in Costa Rica, they have a set questionnaire and like a step-by-step process. Every country is a little bit different, but for the most part, they all have a type of questionnaire that kind of like guides you through the whole equivalency review, and then we submit that to the standard bureau of that country. So what I'm not clear on is what is the process in TTBS, what type of document, where can I find it? That is the part that I'm not very familiar or or understanding at this point.
Okay, thanks, Giselle. So I would hand over now to Mr. Larry Gopichand. So he is the main person in our implementation division, looking at those, what we would say, conformity assessment issues. So Larry, can I turn it over to you?
Yes, pleasant good
Okay,
morning,
great.
everyone, and welcome to all our stakeholders, all valuable stakeholders. And the question posed is a very valid and viable question that we deal with on a daily basis. The product certification process or documentation submission process is not something that has been published. It is a process that we work with based on the continual use of a methodology and such. But it entails, if your product is manufactured in a certain country or being certified by a certain lab in another country, all we need to get is a test report from that independent lab for that product, and the test report for safety, electrical safety, must state the standard it is referencing to perform those tests. Over the last 10 years, there have been many different organizations that came up that are now doing product certification, and they are being accepted internationally. Of recent times, we heard of MET, and the slide that Mr. Kevin Grant showed with some of the examples of product certification marks showed MET as one of the most recent ones. We also have EAC coming out of the European community. So there are a number of standard marks, product certification marks that are coming out. So for us to generate a list, it will be very dynamic. What we ask for is the engagement of the manufacturer or the importer to submit documentation to us first. That's the process. Submit your documentation to us first, and then we will take it there. Mr. Buchun give the email contacts, and we try to be as very efficient in our response. We hope to get responses within a certain time frame, acceptable within 48 hours, given how the world dynamics go, and we get a response to you and get you on the track to getting your product, knowing if it can be accepted or it cannot be accepted, and if it cannot be accepted, the reasoning for it not to be accepted. So to answer the question very briefly, no, there is no documented process that we can submit to you. We may look at that as a future development for us internally, but at this point in time, the best methodology is to submit all your test reports for electrical safety to either one of the emails you identified before.
Mr. Larry,
Yes.
Nice to talk to you. I met you many, many years ago, like 15 years ago, and you taught me about this, actually.
Yes.
So, so thank you. My concern with this is I represent a company that has a lot of electrical appliances. I mean, a lot. We have over, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 items. So being able to collect all the test reports for every single type of appliance and submit it, that would be very difficult for us.
Understandably.
So, so yeah, and especially because we have different brands and we're continuously changing the products that we have on the sales floor, so that we can have a rich offer to our clients. So that is why, and maybe this is a separate conversation, and I don't want to take everyone's time, but not having kind of like a roadmap for which ones which certification, international certifications are closer or equivalent to yours, really makes it difficult for.
All right. So the short answer to that, you said you engage our services and you've been in contact with us through your company over the last maybe 10 plus more years, right? The traditional standard marks still remain the same. The ones that have been since dinosaurs were on the earth. Yeah, we still have those standard marks Right, we have the UL,
The norms, the
CSE
ULCTL.
norm, right. So if you're seeing marks that are not familiar to you, being one of you, you're probably the most expert than I am because it's your product field. But if you're seeing marks that you yourself know that you're not familiar with, you can send us the documentation or send us some information, and we will more than willing, even if it is 50. I mean, that's what we are here for. It will be very time consuming. We will assist as best as we can. We have the capability and we will assist. The other reason too is that by doing that, we have a paper trail to show any auditing processes that may come up, asking the same question that you're asking. Has this item been assessed? Has this item been approved? And so the paper trail is what creates that type of environment as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Larry.
No problem.
Thank you, Giselle and Larry, for responding. I would go to the next question in the chat before I go to Nizla. Sorry. Can the labeling information be on the packaging and product only, or packaging only or product only? What is the acceptable labeling placement requirements? So Kimberly, you just want to highlight what the requirement is?
Yes, thank you, Nadita. So can you'll see my screen, right? So I'm in clause 4 right now, which speaks to the general labeling. All labeling shall be legible and conspicuous. So we have the information shall be marked or permanently affixed to the appliances. That's this list from A to K. So all of this information has to be on the appliance. And then I believe we have on the packaging, the functionality of the electrical appliance, a brief description and the conditions for operation, as well as special handling instructions and an indication of whether it was reconditioned, remanufactured, refurbished. So these are the things that needs to be on the packaging itself, and on the appliance is clause 4.1.2. Is that clear enough? Yeah, any questions, any further questions on that?
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, thanks, Kimberly. So yes, so what we encourage all stakeholders to take a look at the document that is required to be. We have had concerns in terms, but through several revisions, compulsory standards. On the information that is required directly on the appliance, and we'd appreciate those comments in writing. I'm going to another question. So it is just a quick one, and then I will go to Nizla. Sorry. So there's supplies, UPS supplies, voltage regulators fall within the scope. And Kimberly, if you could just go back up to the scope. So the quick answer is that for this standard, we're looking at appliances. But Kimberly, do you want to highlight our next upcoming draft compulsory standard that is out for comment as well?
Yes, I can speak to that as well. So thank you for your question, Ravi. This standard does not cover those items, the UPS voltage regulators. That would fall under our electrical accessories and components standard. It will be similar to this standard in that we will group all of those relevant standard for electrical accessories and components in one document along with the labeling requirements. That is currently out for comment So you all may have seen an ad in the newspapers, and it's also uploaded on our TTBS website as well. So if you look under standards for public comment, you should see PCTTCS 23, accessories and components. And that would highlight, it's very similar to this document. It does not have a refrigerants clause because none of those items would contain refrigerants, but it's very similar to the document we're reviewing today. The only difference is it's targeting all of those accessories and components. So this is the way that we would like to separate all these standards. And we have a third standard in this type of alignment, and that would be for all our lighting product standards. And that will also be released for public comment within the next month or so, and then you'll be able to review that one as well. So short answer is no, it's not covered in the standard we are here to deal with today, electrical appliances. It will be covered in accessories and components.
Thank you, Kimberly. So I would now invite Nisla Sori to raise.
Don't worry. Hi, everyone. I'm Nisla from LG Electronics.
Miss Sori?
Yes. Nisla, sorry. Yeah, I want to talk about something from as a manufacturer. We know about this regulation since 2019 actually. Something that we have as a manufacturer is that, for example, Trinidad and Tobago is place where for us as a regional, we don't have in this case like close to this country security regulations, right? For example, we manage Trinidad and Tobago or all Caribbean islands or for example, Central America region. And when we talk about this, we don't have like security standards in this regional place. So practically like to add the region in kind of a for example, for line and to get the regulation, we have the opportunity to use some equivalent models or some equivalent energy reports that we had, but it's very, very hard. And you can see we always have like issues with TTBS for this because we have to explain what we have, which model we have equivalent with another country, because all the certification marks that TTBS add in the list they already have are very international, and right now in the region that we are, it is not like simple, and it isn't for us. So that is something that I wanted to explain. Maybe I'm going to comment in the public under comment. And that's about the certification market. That is something that maybe we can have the issue. I don't know if you're going to have available like a laboratory there in Trinidad and Tobago to make the test, or you are going to allow that all the tests are made, for example, the IEC test allowed to be tested by our manufacturers, laboratory. For example, I have laboratories that made all these regulations. It makes more easy and more ships for me. But sometimes, and well, I also present some in some of my case that I have a laboratory LG do this, all these regulation standards, but TTBS, they didn't want to accept it. I have to present a lot of things to accept this kind of report. So yeah, I would like to have like all the requirements that maybe they can allow to all my factories do this report, because I have the option to do this in my laboratory and be more easy for us. Because regionally, I have, like, for example, UL very expensive standard. Normally, we try to not to do UL. Well, yeah, very easy. But normally we are doing in our laboratory. So I don't know if you're flexible, because I already have solved my
Sorry,
case.
Nisla.
Yeah.
Nisla, just one point. We're getting a lot of feedback from you. So, I mean, we're getting some of the issues that you're raising, but it is very difficult. The feedback is affecting the quality of the comments. So
Okay.
what we can do is that you can reach out to us directly, and you know, in terms of what I understand to be the substantive is, what we have tried to do is use the IC, which we know is the basis of many of the standards being used to manufacture appliances world over. And we understand that there might be slight differences. Now, because we are importing a lot of products from different countries, we don't want to be overly burdensome or onerous, and there are different marks that we accept. So you can reach out to us directly, and we can probably have a meeting on this. There are a couple of marks that Larry would have already indicated have been like pre-approved. You know, we have NOM, the ETL, the UL. We also wanted to highlight, you know, that there might be slight differences from the UL standard. It's one of the recognized marks that we have been using for a number of years. CSA as well. So quite a number of different marks from different countries. We want to ensure that we have the entry of safe electrical appliances. So we could always meet with you. And
yeah,
so
what
just
I want
confirming, can you all hear me well?
For example, TTBS study the possibility, I don't know how they can handle, for example, a regional that is not Mexico, a regional here in Central America, here like in every country that we have close, America, we have close Guatemala, we have close Jamaica, that you can reach some standards that is not the non-normative, because the non-normative has electrical requirements that are very different actually in our region. So, and also China, also all the standards, maybe they can like find some normative that it's very equivalent in a region that we can apply for the certification mark and it's easy.
Hi, Nisla. Again, the quality of the comments has been affected by the feedback, but I understand that you indicated, you know, there should be something at a regional level. So what you can do is contact me or Kimberly directly, and we can have further discussions. There is the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, and they look at certain standards across the CARICOM region, so that there is that level of regional harmonization. One of the issues, though, in terms of what we're doing here for Trinidad and Tobago, this essentially falls under the purview of a technical regulation. So what you can do is send us the comment in writing, and we will take a look at it and determine how we can approach regional harmonization, because standardizing electrical requirements across many different countries has been a bit of a challenge for a number of years. And each country has slightly different requirements, but it's something that we can take on board. So thank you for that comment. So I'm now going to any other comments from the chat, and I believe the next one we had in order of, how the comments came in is from Mr. Juggernaut. I missed the part on labeling of household fans. Can you inform me on this? So Kimberly, you just want to touch on those requirements again?
Okay, sure. So Mr. Juggernaut, those requirements will be the same as I previously mentioned. The general labeling, the information shall be marked on the appliance, everything from clause 4.1.2, the name, registered trademark, country of origin, model number, serial number, indication of rebuilt, reconditioned, remanufactured, indication of whether it's used, the nature of the voltage supply, rated voltage, rated current, certification mark, and hazard warnings. The rated frequency shall be marked if applicable. And then on the box, it should state the functionality of the electrical appliance, product description, conditions for operations, as well as indication on the packaging for whether it was reconditioned, remanufactured, or refurbished. So those three things need to be on the packaging, and then this information should be on the electrical appliance. So that would apply to fans as well.
Okay, thanks, Kimberly. So we're getting close to 12, but I want to go through as many questions. So perhaps we can go on for another 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll go very quickly now. There's a comment on the composition of refrigerant. So Kimberly, could you just go to that section and indicate why it has been included?
Yes, so the composition was included in this clause so that we will be in compliance with our obligation to the Montreal Protocol. So this is a national requirement that we need to have in order to monitor all the refrigerants coming into the country and in electrical appliances. And this would really apply to blends if the refrigerant used is a blend. Nadisa?
Yes, Kimberly.
Yeah, so that's it. It was really just to the reason for the composition is to comply with our obligation to the Montreal Protocol. It's a national requirement that we need to have so that we can monitor the refrigerants coming in, whether it's in electrical appliances or coming in and to the country at any point.
Thank you, Kimberly. So I wanted to touch on the next question came in from Linda Miranda. And so they say that we carry out safety tests aligned to the 2010-2040, and I'm assuming she means from the AHRI standard that deals with performance ratings for air conditioning. And my response to that is that we also have an energy labeling standard that was developed at a regional level. So this would be under the purview of CROSQ, the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. And we have not yet set requirements for the energy performance of air conditioners or refrigerating equipment. So at this time, we don't have anything that is mandatory, but we expect and anticipate that within the next maybe 2 years that we will have mandatory requirements for energy efficiency, and that work is ongoing together with the Ministry of Plan and Development, and there's a special project for minimum energy performance, and that will be established shortly. So at this time, we don't have any minimum energy performance requirements for air conditioning equipment, refrigeration equipment, but it is under active consideration. One of the challenges, and you'd have mentioned the testing, the particular challenge is the testing infrastructure and the costs associated with demonstrating compliance. but TTBS is actively considering that issue, and we expect that mandatory requirements will be introduced in some time to come. So I'm just going quickly to the next question. When or what date will this new standard or process for electrical appliances begin to be implemented? And we have some time again to go. So the first step, we're here with the public comment, and we need to do some additional meetings based on the comments that we're receiving. We will go to the comment disposition at the close of the 60-day period. So Kimberly, if you could just give the close of the comment period.
So the comment period will be extended to Friday, the 12th of August to facilitate this consultation. So we're giving you all a week to send in your comments.
And we're also taking note of all the comments that we're receiving here. What happens after we address all the comments is that we have to submit the draft standard for approval, and that is by the TTBS Board of Directors. So we are looking at an additional 2 months, and then we need to get what we call a compulsory standards order. So that can be an additional 2 months. So I would say a reasonable estimate for the standard to be published will be about 6 months from August. And then I will turn it over to Larry. He has his hand up and I believe he wants to comment, but when the standard is declared compulsory, what the implementation division would normally do is host another consultation, a rollout meeting to advise of the moratorium, because some time would be given for all manufacturers and importers to basically come into compliance with the requirements of the updated compulsory standard. So Larry, I turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah, Nadita, thanks. I just want to respond, I think, to Linda Miranda. Her question is not so much on the refrigerant. I think her question, and this is a common question asked, when they submit test reports for appliances, they are tested to 220, 240 volts for the appliances that operate in the Trinidad and Tobago environment under the 110, 120 scenario. For instance, they will send a test report for a washing machine, an electric fan, a refrigerator that uses 220, 240 in their test methodology. And we are asking them to provide it the same exact test report, but this time testing into the lower frequency, the lower voltage range of the 110, 120, 115 plus or minus 6%. So this is the main question. The reason we ask for that is that your higher voltage will mean that your input current will be less, and then your overall power rating will probably be less as well too. But when you apply it, and that is in your jurisdiction, but when you apply it to our jurisdiction now, especially for motorized appliances, there'll be some issues with the power ratings. So that is why we need to have a consistency with the test reports that you all are asking to accept. We traditionally do not, or not traditionally, we do not accept the higher voltage for the appliance if it is to operate at the lower voltage in Trinidad and Tobago. What you can do is ask your testing lab to test for the range of voltage. And it has happened in many other instances. You can do a range of voltages for a lot of different regions, and you will cover a wide variety with that same test report. 90 to maybe 225, all right, 227, and they have stated that in the IEC standard that can be accepted. So you may consider that, but when you restrict it just to the 220, 240 volts for the appliance that has to operate at a 110, 120 volts, and again, in Trinidad, it is 60 hertz cycle, not 50 hertz. So those parameters must be maintained. I hope, Miss Miranda, that answers your question.
Thanks, Larry. So Kimberly could just go back to the scope. So just one additional point to what Larry indicated is that there are some appliances that may operate at dual voltages and also dual frequencies. What we have given here would be the conditions for Trinidad and Tobago. And we have to be within those limits as Larry indicated. So Irvin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, it's just to kind of reiterate and build on the same point which you've started there. So I wanted to draw reference to that issue, and this was one of the I think you had mentioned it before earlier, Nadita, with the reason for the not having the published list of the certification marks and the standards, because the standards will allow for the wide range of ratings. So sometimes in the past, we would have seen products try to be imported or submitted for approval that would be listed for different jurisdictions. So there was a confusion that the product should be accepted because it was listed. And really the reason for the case-by-case approach was taken to allow for the assessment to ensure that the products are in alignment with the scope as we see on the screen here. So that's one of the main reasons why we'd have to treat with it like that moving forward until the procedure changed to something else.
So thanks, Irvin. So what I wanted to say as well is that this document, when finalized, would also be freely available. So you can actually take this to your supplier, whether it be a manufacturer or another third party, to confirm that the voltage ranges are appropriate for Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the frequency, because especially when purchasing from countries that use a different voltage frequency electrical system, it poses challenges for use in Trinidad and Tobago. So we'd like that to be harmonized as far as possible. There are some appliances that would have the dual ratings for the voltages, but especially when purchasing from Europe, where they use different systems, it may pose a challenge. A lot of the requirements are pretty standardized across the North American, Latin American region, where we use a 60 Hertz cycle. And that is why there's that close alignment to the UL, the NOM, the CSA, etc., which would be traditional. And of course, China being a major supplier would manufacture products for different regions. So there's normally no challenge there. It is when that there's a difference between the voltage or the frequency system that we may have some challenges from the user perspective. So I'm not seeing any additional hands, but if there are any additional questions, maybe we could take one or two and then seek to close the meeting. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions or hands, but I would invite Mr. Rodney Ramnath, our acting executive, to give us some brief closing remarks if he's available. Rodney?
In closing, I'd just like to thank everyone for making time to come to this stakeholder consultation and providing the feedback and the comments to the Bureau, which is something that we do take very seriously. All of those comments we will review in moving forward and finalizing the standards. So I'd just like to say thanks again, and back to you, Nadita.
Thanks, Rodney. So we are extending the comment period as Kimberly indicated. So comments can be sent to her directly, or it can be sent to me as well. So I'm including our email addresses in the chat. We invite anyone to reach out to us directly if they want to have more in-depth discussions before we finalize, because we want to ensure that the standard is, as we had said, basically changing the approach to be a more consolidated approach. So this is a more generalized type of requirements, and it consolidates some of the practices that we're already using for conformity assessment And we appreciate that issue of the certification marks, and what is accepted in Trinidad and Tobago is one that, you know, there has been significant interest. But what we have done is we have allowed many different product certification marks to be utilized for electrical appliances for a number of years. So we are seeking to, through the compulsory standard, consolidate the requirements. And of course, the implementation division has a very robust scheme where they would evaluate the particular mark and, very importantly, the particular standard that the product is manufactured to. So we want to ensure that there is that level of review by TTBS before the product is allowed onto the market. And I know that we have a lot of the major retailers here with us today, as well as some of the representatives of the manufacturing companies. So if there are any further questions, they can reach out to us directly and we can facilitate the meeting. We would also be looking at one of the issues in terms of e-waste, and that is something that we're looking at together with the Environmental Management Authority. So we'd want to ensure that we are fulfilling the mandate of Trinidad and Tobago. Kimberly would have also indicated that we have the Montreal Protocol as well. So what we're doing is supporting the overall government mandates on several different fronts, and one being electrical safety. Of course, that is a major area for TTBS, but environmental management and possibly also any type of issues that may come up with disposal as well. So we want to take all those issues on board, and we really value all the time and the participation and the feedback that we're getting. So again, thank you all, and we will seek to close the meeting shortly. There is a YouTube link where the session can be reviewed, and any further comments can be submitted to us, and we will be in touch on that. So thank you again.